Imagine a nation born in the shadow of loss, surrounded by uncertainty, and immediately thrust into battles for its very survival. The history of Israel's military struggles is not just about wars and weapons, but about resilience, identity, and the unending quest to live in peace amidst constant conflict. The birth of the State of Israel in 1948 marked one of the most significant and turbulent moments in modern history. For decades prior, Jewish communities had dreamed of establishing a homeland in the land of their ancestors, especially after enduring centuries of persecution in Europe, culminating in the Holocaust. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a partition plan to divide the land of Palestine into two states, one for Jews and one for Arabs, with Jerusalem as an international city. The Jewish leadership accepted the plan despite its limitations, while most Arab leaders rejected it, seeing it as unjust and illegitimate. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, head of the Jewish Agency, proclaimed the independence of the State of Israel, just as the British mandate was coming to an end. Almost immediately, war broke out as armies from neighboring countries, including Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, launched attacks against the new state. This conflict is known as the War of Independence in Israel and the Nakba, or catastrophe, by Palestinians, as it led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. The battles were fierce and often desperate, with Israel facing the challenge of limited manpower and resources compared to the combined strength of its neighbors. Yet, through determination, international support, and strategic organization, Israel managed to secure its survival and expand its territory beyond the original UN plan. The cost, however, was immense, with heavy casualties on both sides and long-lasting scars that continue to influence the Middle East today. This war not only solidified Israel's existence as a state, but also laid the foundation for the enduring struggle over land, identity, and sovereignty that defines the region's modern history. The Arab-Israeli wars stand as defining chapters in the story of Israel's military history, each conflict carrying its own causes, strategies, and consequences that shaped the political and social landscape of the Middle East. The first was the 1948 war, which followed Israel's declaration of independence and the immediate invasion by neighboring Arab states. This war not only secured Israel's statehood, but also displaced large numbers of Palestinians, a legacy that remains central to the conflict today. Less than a decade later came the 1956 Suez Crisis, when Israel, alongside Britain and France, launched an attack on Egypt after President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Israel's forces advanced into the Sinai Peninsula, showcasing military efficiency, but international pressure, particularly from the United States and the Soviet Union, forced a withdrawal, underscoring the global dimensions of the conflict. In 1967, tensions escalated into the Six-Day War, a moment that dramatically altered borders and balance of power. Israel launched preemptive strikes against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, gaining control of the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights, territories that became central to disputes in the decades to follow. Just 6 years later, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War erupted when Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel during the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Initial setbacks tested Israel's resilience, but counteroffensives eventually turned the tide, though the shock of the war led to re-evaluations of Israel's security policies and contributed to eventual peace efforts with Egypt. Each of these wars highlighted not only the persistence of military conflict, but also the shifting alliances, strategies, and geopolitical stakes that continue to define Israel's place in the region and the world. Beyond the large-scale wars fought between Israel and its neighboring states, a different and ongoing form of conflict emerged in the shape of guerrilla warfare and proxy battles. These struggles were less about conventional armies clashing on open fields and more about irregular tactics, surprise attacks, and long-lasting campaigns designed to weaken Israel's security from within and around its borders. In the years after 1948, Palestinian armed groups began launching raids into Israeli territory, often targeting civilians as well as military outposts. These fed into cycles of retaliation that kept the atmosphere of hostility alive, even when no full-scale war was being fought. Over time, organized groups such as the Palestine Liberation Organization gained strength, receiving support from regional powers that opposed Israel's existence. This use of proxies allowed states like Syria and Iran to indirectly confront Israel without engaging in direct warfare. Later, movements like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza became central players in this asymmetric conflict. Their strategies relied heavily on rocket fire, ambushes, and tunneling operations, forcing Israel to develop new forms of defense and intelligence gathering. The conflicts in Lebanon, particularly the 1982 war and the 2006 confrontation with Hezbollah, showed how non-state actors could inflict significant costs despite Israel's military superiority. Similarly, repeated clashes in Gaza demonstrated how urban warfare and guerrilla tactics blurred the line between civilian and military spaces, creating tragic humanitarian consequences. Proxy battles also extended into the digital and cyber realms, with both sides adapting to new technologies as part of their campaigns. These struggles highlighted that Israel's security challenges were not confined to major wars with defined beginnings and ends, but were instead deeply embedded in a continuous cycle of smaller yet relentless conflicts that shaped daily life and regional politics. Israel's military doctrine developed out of necessity, shaped by the reality of being a small nation surrounded by larger and often hostile neighbors. From the beginning, Israel could not afford to rely on long wars of attrition, since its population and resources were limited compared to the combined strength of the Arab world. This understanding led to a strategy that emphasized rapid mobilization, decisive action, and, when needed, preemptive strikes to neutralize threats before they could fully materialize. The Six-Day War of 1967 became the most striking example of this doctrine in practice, as Israel launched swift aerial and ground assaults that dismantled enemy capabilities in a matter of days. This approach was not only about speed, but also about intelligence and preparation. Israel invested heavily in gathering accurate information, creating a network of surveillance and espionage that allowed it to anticipate enemy moves and act with precision. At the same time, Israel placed strong emphasis on technological innovation, recognizing that advanced weapon systems, communication tools, and defensive capabilities could balance the disparity in manpower. Over time, this philosophy gave rise to projects like the Iron Dome, designed to intercept rockets, and sophisticated cyber defense programs that operate alongside traditional military strategies. Compulsory military service further reinforced the doctrine by ensuring that a significant portion of the population was trained, disciplined, and ready to defend the country on short notice. The doctrine also carried an element of deterrence, projecting strength to discourage attacks by showing that any aggression would be met with overwhelming response. While this strategy has helped ensure Israel's survival in a challenging environment, it has also created cycles of tension, as preemptive actions often sparked criticism and further conflict, revealing the delicate balance between security and diplomacy in Israel's military history. Despite decades of wars and ongoing hostilities, Israel's history is also marked by significant peace efforts and treaties that reshaped its military and political landscape. The first breakthrough came after the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when Egypt, under President Anwar Sadat, took the bold step of pursuing negotiations with Israel. These talks, facilitated by the United States, culminated in the Camp David Accords of 1978 and the formal peace treaty signed in 1979. Egypt became the first Arab country to officially recognize Israel, and in return, Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula, setting a precedent that territorial compromise could lead to stability. This treaty fundamentally altered the balance of power in the region by removing Egypt, the largest Arab military force, from the circle of active conflict. Years later, another milestone was achieved in 1994 with a peace treaty between Israel and Jordan, brokered with U.S. support. This agreement normalized relations, settled border disputes, and promoted cooperation on issues such as water sharing and trade, showing that dialogue could bring tangible benefits even after decades of hostility. Alongside these treaties, attempts were made with the Palestinians, most notably the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, which created the Palestinian Authority and outlined frameworks for coexistence. While these efforts fell short of achieving lasting peace, they demonstrated a willingness to pursue diplomacy alongside military preparedness. These agreements also influenced Israel's defense strategies, allowing it to focus less on large-scale wars with certain neighbors and more on emerging threats from non-state actors. However, peace efforts were not free of controversy, as many in the region and within Israel debated the risks of territorial concessions and political compromise. Even so, the treaties with Egypt and Jordan remain enduring examples of how dialogue managed to temper decades of conflict and reshape the trajectory of Israel's security challenges. In the modern era, Israel's military challenges have shifted from large-scale conventional wars to complex and evolving threats that demand constant adaptation. One of the most prominent issues has been the rise of asymmetric warfare, particularly from groups such as Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, whose tactics include rocket barrages, tunnel networks, and urban combat. These confrontations blur the lines between military and civilian spaces, making responses both militarily and politically complicated. To counter these threats, Israel has invested in advanced defense systems like the Iron Dome, which intercepts short-range rockets, and continues to develop long-range missile defense systems such as David's Sling and the Arrow. At the same time, Israel has emerged as a leader in cyber warfare, both defending against digital attacks and using cyber tools as part of its military strategy. Beyond immediate neighbors, Israel views Iran as a significant threat due to its nuclear ambitions and its support for proxy groups across the region, leading to covert operations, airstrikes in Syria, and diplomatic efforts to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. In addition, Israel must navigate the broader challenges of regional instability, from the Syrian civil war to shifting alliances in the Middle East, as well as the growing involvement of global powers in the region. Internally, the ongoing conflict with Palestinians remains unresolved, with flare-ups of violence that continually test Israel's security and diplomacy. Despite these dangers, Israel also benefits from strategic partnerships, particularly with the United States, which provides military aid and technological collaboration. Modern conflicts highlight that Israel's security no longer depends solely on battlefield victories, but on maintaining technological superiority, intelligence dominance, and international alliances, while balancing the enduring need for peace with the constant reality of potential new conflicts. The story of Israel's military history is one of survival, struggle, and constant transformation. From its earliest battles in 1948 to the wars that reshaped its borders, from the guerrilla campaigns that tested its resilience to the peace treaties that altered its regional role, Israel has navigated a path filled with both triumphs and tragedies. Its doctrine of preemptive strength, reliance on innovation, and determination to defend itself reflect the reality of a nation that has always lived under the shadow of conflict. Yet, alongside the wars and security challenges, there have been moments of courage in seeking peace, as seen with Egypt and Jordan, showing that even the fiercest enemies can find common ground. In today's world, Israel's conflicts are less about vast armies and more about rockets, cyber threats, and regional rivalries, but the underlying question remains the same. How can a small state secure its future in a turbulent neighborhood? The lessons of this history remind us that while military strength may protect borders, it is dialogue and cooperation that offer the possibility of breaking cycles of war. Israel's journey demonstrates both the power of resilience and the ongoing challenge of balancing defense with the pursuit of peace in one of the most complex regions of the world.